The Cairo National Museum spent much of its time closed after the Arab Spring. This is the repository of ancient Egyptian sculptures and treasures, like Tutankhamun's mask, which is as refined as it looks. Stone representations of dreadlocks were much more frequent than I'd anticipated, but there were Black Africa, as they call it, pharaohs, as well as Northern Nile pharaohs. The museum itself is a bit of a jumble, but we were jumbled in there and tumbled fairly quickly back out of there. The authorities and the security wanted to make sure that the special opening for our group didn't attract too much attention. Why is it being open just for those Westerners? There are mummies with dreadlocks. I'm not talking about the other teachers there. The Tutankhamun mask like headgear is to cover the display of wealth. Entwined with the dreadlocks of the pharaoh, it holds his power. And others, mortals, aren't allowed to look on his power. It's a funereal mask. There are skulls that still have the dreadlocks attached as well, like mummies. Of course, later, Celts and Vikings and Germanic people also wore their hair in snakes, the Romans can tell us, chronicle for us. When I've
Welcome to Cairo, the bustling capital city of Egypt. So what do Egyptians do at night? Is there a vibrant nightlife scene in this city of over 22 million? Whether it's sitting at cafes, smoking shisha, or watching football matches and having coffee. Going out to dinner with friends, or simply wandering the streets shopping.
Night boat to Cairo.
visited Rome with architectural college, I was struck by the flat death shapes. There's decoration all over the caskets. Sarcophagi, the ossuary where they keep the bones. Series of flat death shapes all the way around. This is a striggle or a struggle. The shape of a modern day bricklayer's bucket handled pointing trowel. It was a razor that was used to take all the hair off the body, a cleanliness thing. It makes your body feel alive. Your skin tingle, a bit like how people thrash themselves with bits of bush after a sauna. You have to be able to afford razors though, don't you? So it's a status thing, isn't it? The lack of hair on the body. Not everyone was doing it, so people didn't want to do it. It's not a modern phenomenon. In ancient Egypt, some women removed their pubic hair through copper razors, flint stones, and a process called sugaring. Like waxing, in which you heat up water and sugar into a paste-like substance, which was used to remove hair with strips of cloth. However, it should be pointed out that not all ancient Egyptians partook in removing their pubic hair, as many hieroglyphs and works of art depict women and men with dark triangles around their genitals. In Rome, upper-class women got rid of their pubic hair through a mixture of tweezers, smith stones and depilatories, and copper razors. Additionally, a woman of ancient Greece would remove their bush through plucking out each individual hair or singeing it off with heat. No thanks. In one of Aristophanes' plays, a man who plans to go undercover as a woman to spy is held down and plucked entirely of pubic hair, an act that feminizes him. If you take a close look at ancient Greece art sculptures, you'll be hard-pressed to find women sporting any hair down below, further indicating that it was a dignified act to be bald below the waist. In the Middle Ages, it was disease prevention by prostitutes. So if you were a bit posh, you'd more likely have pubes. Dust, dirt, lice and vermin were rampant in the Dark Ages, and pubic hair protected. Naughty photos inevitably accompanied the first cameras and lithographic prints, and they show a trimmed state of affairs. You'd have to be rather trusting to let a cutthroat razor near your bits, wouldn't you? Gillette, 1915, specifically market razors to women, mainly for unsightly and objectionable underarm hair. Gillette sounds like a French name to me, but French women famously keep their arm hair, don't they? The 1970s were all natural. The 80s and 90s with the high-hipped swimming costume. The landing strip became very popular, Baywatch style. While you wouldn't really think of Brazilian bikini waxes as civilised, it's much better than boiling hot sugar water burning yourself, isn't it? This at the same time that there's a craze for gentlemen's beards up against it, which take just as much grooming.
When the workday is over and the heat dissipates, the streets come alive with people walking, shopping, eating, and socializing. But what is the Egyptian nightlife truly like in Cairo? In the West, when we hear the word nightlife, we typically think of bars, clubs, dancing, and live music, with the expectation that all of these establishments providing the entertainment will be serving alcohol. But Egypt is an Islamic country, with an estimated 90% of Egyptians practicing Islam, and Islam forbids the consumption of alcohol. The activity at night on the streets of Cairo is energetic. And yes, there are bars, clubs, and parties.
Towards the tail end of the Arab Spring in Cairo, Egypt, a dozen of us were arriving on each plane, and we were all to assemble in a local airport hotel before moving on to Mardi, where we would have some assimilation and training. Mardi is in the centre of Cairo, where a lot of foreigners congregate. Not really proper Cairo. Heliopolis is perhaps the true centre of Cairo. You'd have to be quite hardcore into your integrating and learning the language if you're going to live in Heliopolis, really close to Tahrir Square. Do you remember that? Back at the airport, we're arriving in couples. Everyone seems to be in couples apart from me and the last blonde woman coming from 100 metres away with having to wait longer for her baggage. I think the handlers were messing her about a bit. I wouldn't have been displeased, but you could see from that 100 metres away that she wasn't best pleased with the social engineering that the recruiters at the school had managed. If they, HR, do a bit of matchmaking, they retain their staff better. But I was getting a filthy look, the evil eye, from a distance. And this is in the land of the originator of the all-seeing eye, ancient Egypt. From Mardi, we were looking round at apartments, say 30 people, travelling around all different districts of Cairo to see apartments for rent. All assembled outside the minibus, 30 people into an apartment, hardly know each other, 5 minutes and out again and on to the next one, driving for half an hour. So strange, sort of shuffling around, nightclub-like intimacy between people. Very different ages, you really don't know. But you do know we're going to be quite unnecessarily venomous by the end of the first term. It's just the way of covering their backs. The young blonde woman quickly managed to get away from me. That I wasn't blanking her, I wasn't being overly friendly. I think she'd been through a breakup. She was latching herself onto the estate agent, man, that will be doing very well out of his commission for the lot of us. I plumbed for the big place that just needed the cigarette smoke and grease cleaning off, which I was happy to do. A lot of people went for Mardi, but it was a long bus ride to the school, and though the minibuses were laid on, it would have taken quite a lot of time out of your day. Only one couple that had previously been teaching in Ethiopia bided their time and eventually moved to Heliopolis area, the bustling centre, but they were quite an adventurous pair. I visited them in Heliopolis one time. All Egyptians on the streets, mostly men. Still small numbers of throngs of people in Tahrir Square, and placarded, but not the huge mass demonstrations that had been so effective in the Arab Spring. I'd been thrilled when I met in the elevator in the hotel near the airport some BBC film crew and reporters that were chronicling developments to put on the 9 o'clock news. And they had thought me so daring to come and work here. Little raised the eyebrows as well. It could still go either way. I got a taxi back from my colleague couple's period detailed place. The same taxi firm that was to take me to the pyramids and was commonly used by the school. Now I can't possibly know the best route from the town centre to my suburban gated community on the main road out near the school. But the youngest taxi driver with the worst English, which we'd met before, was the one that came and collected me, and I was sure he was taking me a circuitous tourist route for his own amusement rather than mine. He wanted to see my reaction to taking me into the heart of things. We did a circuit or two of Tahrir Square. I think he was making out that he couldn't take the exit because of traffic. Just me and him in the car. The tone of his conversation was a little like, "You are alone here. Who will know if you are here? Are you worried?" I think he was trying to convey a bit of, hopefully for humour, "Are you worth kidnapping?" inquiry. Now, I'm of no worth to anyone, but not far out of Tahrir Square, there's a shortcut that you can take that goes through, well, several-storey European-style century and this century flats give way to almost like a dark alleyway of single-storey buildings. There was a familiarity of them because you get similar single-storey buildings in a lot of towns in southern Spain and throughout North Africa. It's traditional housing. But though fairly wide streets, I'm exaggerating a bit with the alleyway, there was no street lighting worth mentioning. And you forget how a woman can feel less safe. There were fewer people in the streets and they were wearing more traditional garments. I could really have been heading to the centre of a ghetto where I would be held for a little while until any ransom demands were met, but I kept him talking. I tried to create a bond, but not show any concern. It was mainly anti-American. We both have the same common enemy. Europeans don't like Americans either. You find this difficult to believe because it just presumes Britain and America are brothers in arms. Governments, possibly. You couldn't really identify with my little rant about number of national holidays you get. Yeah. But while the single-storey street did go on for a long time, he was going at an appropriately slow speed. But that did also suggest in my mind that he could stop at any time. We did get past the Muslim rebels' stronghold, ghetto, and the road opened out onto a roundabout, and we were out of town, on the motorway. The ladies still sweeping sand off the motorway, as they do, for miles, for days, and years. But indeed, he did deliver me to my gated community and my security-guarded home from home. Now, you should know my view on tipping culture by now. Within this gated community, the Arab Spring Revolution was different from Heliopolis, and even different to Mahdi. Mahdi is on the banks of the river, and any protests I saw there were sort of loud marching, drumming affairs marching through the markets and the riverfront. Mostly men letting off steam. They had a very different atmosphere. The roundabout at my gated community, it was almost all women. The men would have been working, perhaps in banks or in business. Everything's business, isn't it? The red hand gang, I used to call them. There was like a red hand symbol logo that they used to hold up on their bands. Something to do with Muslim. But the protest, on the face of it, seemed to be about women maintaining their privilege of being able to stay at home and not work. They didn't want to be dragged into the way of work by consumerism. Women being obliged to work would have been an abuse to them, really. It seemed, in this little world, a protest of privilege, and the right to maintain that privilege. In a household of plenty, I think the husband is a better husband than for the poorer persons of Mahdi, without any sort of social security system to fall back on, perhaps. Not such good husbands. There had been a plan to go camping way on down south in Saqqara. Saqqara is the place with some of the oldest burial Egyptian monuments, and also perhaps the most intimate and interesting. Death on the Nile Hotel, none of that for us, but there was a general consensus that this had to be, not by the teachers, but by the management, that this had to be stopped. Couldn't ensure security. We hadn't even looked for this seniority. For the same Sharm el Sheikh, all-inclusive families. The posh British, absolutely brilliant Spanish classic guitar player that used to play in the school lobby every time it was time to get the bus back to Mahdi. I went to Alexandria, wanting the history and the scuba diving to submerged ruins. Atlantis. The Mediterranean's been so overfished, though, I didn't really want to go with them. Though, very nice family, I'd have enjoyed that holiday. I went recommended to a Sinbad hotel entirely on my Todd to Dahab. I arrived on the rather sweaty bus, big bus this time, sat right behind a really loud Egyptian American that was really acting cock of the walk. I asked him to quieten it down a little bit, nicely, and he's just showing off in front of his wife or girlfriend and his friends or local relatives. And he's giving it all this, I'm gonna mess you up, but using a different word that YouTube might not approve of, with a little help from my friends. I just sat my ground and suffered him, really. Well, this was on the way back, actually, because there was a cleaner on the same bus, a cleaner from the school on the same bus that had been back to see her family. And she'd sort of said about my difficulties to the head of year. I'd seen someone I vaguely recognised, but I didn't really know why. Of course, the head of department gave me a bit of a mystery to solve, because he knew all about it and was recounting it back to me, but with a concerned tone of, "You must have started it," knowing full well that that wasn't the case, because he'd got a reliable report. As the Wembley comedians used to say, "That's you, that is." The head of department had been from the onset attacking me without due cause. There's always got to be a casualty. HR have always got to be busy. Anyway, Dahab. Lovely and quiet place. The bridge is perhaps the centre of Dahab. There's a fountain. Bridge dodgy as anything in the evening. There's loads of little kids trying to sell hash or anything else. They want you to be interested in, and I'm not. I was there for the diving, and I did so every day for 2 weeks. Dahab slightly further down the coast, and you've got less of a boat ride than you would do for Sharm el Sheikh. For some of the less visited places that I'd already been to for liveaboard boat. Scuba cruise. I spent most of those evenings sat with the female dive instructors, smoking shisha into the night. You'd start to feel quite subdued from the relaxed exertions of the scuba trips, the breathing after a few days. There was 3 city traders from London that sort of adopted me as well. They were good fun. They'd given up on Sharm el Sheikh as a result and gone for something more authentic. Bar hopping and drinking in the pool. And a bit of dancing in empty discos. Daftly. The scuba diving camel safari was by far the highlight of the 2 weeks though. You take your bottles, your air canisters, on your camel with you and your gear. And you go off back in time, really. You're getting a meal laid on after your coastal meanderings. You know, reed hut, enhanced best quality local vegetarian food. The reed huts and camels are what the whole of the sea coast would have been like back before the all-inclusive multi-storey hotel resorts. And even before the fake boat, fake 1970s concrete cave discos of Dahab, or single-storey marketplace. It would have just been temporary tribal reed huts. But of course, out in the middle of nowhere as we seem to be, but actually not far from that rope bridge that people can drive to by road, there's a policeman or 2 with a machine gun. Just to make sure that the camel safari doesn't get kidnapped. From the day's reed shack habitation, as old as the pyramids. Though I suppose the camel herders could make off with your gear while you're underwater, couldn't they? My actual accommodation back in Dahab, though the communal areas had a wonderful harissa and selection of hammocks, the actual beds had bugs. No, there was no AC either. And the authenticity of sleeping on a straw mattress. It was a festival while I was there, and the local marketplace was full of goats and sheep down from the mountains. They meet a sticky end. You could actually watch some of the families slaughtering their goats in the street so that they could eat meat for the festival. It was a ritual sacrifice like you would have seen in animistic times, the pharaoh type worship long before Muslims did. But while I wasn't even going to Sharm el Sheikh, I had no interest in going there. It was the arrival in Dahab and the taxi drivers that hassle you straight off the bus. Do you want to go to Sharm el Sheikh? And they're sort of quite vociferously hassling you and pouring at you to go to somewhere where you don't want to go, just so they can earn money. Now, this got so bad that there was a nice car-ish for their two young guys, one in the front seat, one in the passenger seat, and I was walking to more or less where I knew where to go for my lodgings, and they're curb crawling me down the street. They know that I've given them a no. It's been very clearly put to them. The firmer I put it, the more insistent that I should go somewhere I don't want to go they are. No, I don't like being curb crawled. Even from 50 metres away, they were still doing it. For some stupid reason, I decided the only thing to do was to weakly, and not really hardly in their direction at all, to throw a stone. Now, of course, they threw it back much more accurately. After getting out of the car, I didn't quite know what was going to happen when they jumped out of the car, but it did clearly communicate to them a no. So that was good. But they had then surreptitiously followed me to my hotel location-ish, where I was fine-tuning my directions. And they were plotting a hotel robbery, but the local, quieter community closed ranks on them. Gated hotel complexes in Sharm el Sheikh are that way for a reason. Must be horrendous harassment. That's the trickle-down economy. But covered in mosquito repellent and sleeping under a cotton sheet that I'd brought myself. Dahab was a great holiday, and it sounded much better than the other teachers that had come back from Sharm. They'd spent most of their time practicing a head jab of the eyes, where they're not really observing their colleagues in less than bikinis. Head jab of the eyes is actually something that every good Muslim should practice. It's the man shouldn't ogle the woman. Even matter-of-fact appreciation can cause offence, which, when the woman is flamboyantly wanting to be noticed, it can prove a bit tricky for the waiter, wherever. I mentioned the pyramids of Giza. Went there a couple of times. There's a wonderful route you can take from a poorer part of town. You go through the complex, the gates, and then through the roads around the pyramids. You can take the horse and cart, but it's easy and short enough to walk. Past the Sphinx, give it a kiss. Just like you held the Eiffel Tower on the palm of your hand. And on round past the back end of the Sphinx, you eventually come to a big old colonial hotel, I think you'd say. Beautiful palace, and they've got a well-stocked bar where you can have some nicely mixed cocktails. I did this route a second time with a friend that had come to visit. We had the taxi to these, what are to me, back gates, but it's a main road. The local boys wanting to be your guide. Don't know how much they know. I tend to go for an older guy. They were jumping on the bonnet of the car while it was still moving at some speed so that they could get your attention, rather than as you not being able to get out the car door once you'd stopped. I steered clear of any guides, but the one that stayed on the bonnet for a good 100 metres, I couldn't. Desperate or nuts, who could say? Local youths with gang-affiliated facial scars, not distant. Even the taxi driver was excruciatingly polite and placid about the potential damage to his prized vehicle. Jalopy brand. I was a regular patron of an imam. In my gated community, there was a bread, unleavened flatbread baker in the corner of the local square market that sold everything. The imam from the local mosque just down the road from me that you could hear all the time, really, had this bakery business up in the corner, and a lot of his customers, each time I went there, would be sort of, why are you selling to him? Obviously not in English. I respected that the imam, even if he didn't want to speak English, but we managed to communicate respect. I didn't really get an answer to why his is the best in town. Is it the wood that it's fired on? Is it the oven? Is it the ingredient wheat that he uses? But I think he appreciated my effort and recognised a compliment. I was a regular, but he could have quite happily done without my few dirhams. On another end of a similar spectrum, I had the luxury living locally of going to the school swimming pool on a Saturday. Just me, the sun, and a 25-metre pool all to myself. Then one day, the deputy head and his wife, who'd been working in Qatar previously, had the same idea. He's obviously my superior by some margin. And his beautiful wife in minimalist costumery had all the margins. They were very easy to talk to and a protracted, sedate affair. Conversation. It was all the same, really, as being in the altogether, which I tended to be in my large apartment, home from home.